Well, Donald Trump suffered a crushing defeat today on the thing he obviously cares about most in this world now. No, not Greenland. Donald Trump doesn't care about Greenland anymore. And no, not annexing Canada and making it the 51st state. Donald Trump doesn't care about that anymore either. Donald Trump's one thing at a time attention span should be on his war that he started in Iran, but it's not, as he proved once again today. Donald Trump, as everyone in the world now knows, including the governing regime in Iran that he is at war with, now cares about the ballroom he dreams of building more than anything else in the world. And someone who Donald Trump doesn't even know exists crushed Donald Trump's ballroom dream in the United States Senate, where Donald Trump was hoping Republicans would include $1 billion in a reconciliation bill to pay for Donald Trump's ballroom, which Donald Trump previously told the lie would not require one penny of government money. But the Senate parliamentarian has ruled that according to the strict rules of reconciliation bills, which are uniquely allowed to move through the Senate on simple majority votes of 51, Donald Trump's ballroom cannot be included in a budget reconciliation bill because it doesn't meet those parliamentary rules. Donald Trump, of course, now wants the Senate parliamentarian fired. Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough has been on the job in the Senate since the Democratic majority leader of the Senate at the time, Harry Reid, got her appointed to the job in 2012. Her 14 years as a Senate parliamentarian respected by both Democrats and Republicans is an impressive record, but she is not the most experienced parliamentary expert working in the United States Senate. That is a person Donald Trump has never heard of. He is a parliamentary expert who has made the Senate his life's work. He has been regarded with awe by the most high-ranking and powerful Senate staffers for many decades now, and he has been relied on by Democratic senators and Democratic presidents to save the day more times than anyone can count, from the Clinton administration right through this week. Every reconciliation bill that comes to the Senate floor is challenged by the opposition for parliamentary reasons, and no one has won more of those challenge arguments than Bill Dauster, who now serves as senior counsel to the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. And without mentioning his name, the top Democrat on that committee, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, explained in a video how Bill Dauster, along with other Democratic Senate staffers, convinced parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough to rule against Donald Trump's ballroom. The details of this story are just exquisite for people who already understand Senate parliamentary rules. All you have to know to follow what Senator Whitehouse is about to tell you is that a reconciliation bill includes instructions to every Senate committee that has a piece of that bill, and nothing can get into a reconciliation bill that doesn't comply with those instructions. Don't worry about understanding every little twist and turn that Senator Whitehouse describes in this video you're about to see. Just feel his joy in killing the billionaire ballroom in the Senate and his admiration of and reliance on the brilliant work of Bill Dauster and other Senate staffers who personally made their case directly to the Senate parliamentarian, just as capable Republican Senate staffers made their case to the Senate parliamentarian before she ruled. But those Republican Senate staffers are used to losing with the Senate parliamentarian when Bill Dauster is involved, the man who really crushed the billionaire ballroom with the Senate parliamentarian.
If you want to know how we blew up the Trump billionaire ballroom in the reconciliation process, let me take you into the parliamentary arguments where we won. In order to get the funding through the reconciliation process, the Republicans had to give reconciliation instructions to all the relevant committees. Well, I'm the top Democrat on the Environment and Public Works Committee. Martin Heinrich is the top Democrat on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And guess what? The White House is a public building under the jurisdiction of the Environment Public Works Committee, and it's in a national park under the jurisdiction of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And the Republicans managed not to give reconciliation instructions to either committee. So our lawyers went in, mine arguing for EPW, Martin's arguing for Energy and Natural Resources, that the reconciliation was defective, could not put money to the ballroom because there was no proper instruction allowing money to go to the ballroom because of the jurisdiction of EPW and ENR. We won that argument. It was well prepared and well delivered, and it took only one day for the parliamentarian to decide that, in fact, the ballroom being added to the reconciliation bill was defective and it had to fall. So, bye-bye, billionaire ballroom.
People like Bill Dauster and hundreds of other invisible congressional staffers will never be thanked enough for the work that they do in government service. In Donald Trump's deranged social media post demanding the firing of the Senate parliamentarian, he claimed that the Senate parliamentarian was appointed by President Obama. Donald Trump is the only president in history who thinks the president appoints a Senate parliamentarian, and you could wonder about a president's mental health if the president claimed the Senate parliamentarians are appointed by the president. But with Donald Trump, we have much, much stronger indications of cognitive messiness and possibly serious cognitive decline. Donald Trump's father slipped into a condition described as dementia and Alzheimer's in his 80s. Donald Trump, in a 1997 interview, long before he anticipated becoming a politician, described his father as addled with Alzheimer's. Addled with Alzheimer's. Donald Trump demonstrates that he is addled every day. He cannot get through a day without bursts of incoherence. Donald Trump knows that a parent with dementia or Alzheimer's statistically increases the possibility of you ending up with dementia or Alzheimer's. Donald Trump is now approaching the age when his father's condition became undeniable. The Washington Post reported in 2024, quote, in October 1991, around the time Fred Trump Sr. turned 86 years old, he visited his doctor, C. Ronald McKenzie. In a report about that visit, the physician wrote that he had significant memory impairment with early signs of dementia and obvious memory decline in recent years, according to records disclosed in a court case. So when Donald Trump's father was 86 years old, his doctor said that he had early signs of dementia in recent years. He already had it. How recently did those early signs of dementia begin with Donald Trump's father? When he was 80 years old? Donald Trump knows when his father started exhibiting those symptoms. And as Donald Trump approaches his 80th birthday, you would think that he would try to be very careful about what he says. You would think that he would try to be very careful to make sense and not give anyone the feeling that he might be slipping the way his father did. And you would think that on a day like today, when he was giving the commencement address to the Coast Guard Academy graduating class in New London, Connecticut, that he would not depart from his written text to say things like, I hate good-looking men. Yes, the President of the United States said that today. And yes, it's not the most important thing that happened in the news today, but it is one of today's eruptions from the addled brain of Donald Trump. And we know Donald Trump is full of hatred. He hates countries. He hates people. He hates Democrats. He hates American voters who didn't vote for him. And he hates people who voted for him 3 times, but then disagreed with him on the Epstein files. But he still has room in that vast well of hatred to hate good-looking men, and to do so without explanation, just blurt it out. He says these things as if we understand them. And some people in his audience laughed because what else are you going to do? If that was a joke, no one there could explain it. And in Donald Trump's 50-minute address to the Coast Guard Academy graduates today, he still didn't have the time to explain his war in Iran. Yesterday, Donald Trump said, quote, I don't really have enough time to explain. That's what he said about his war. Doesn't have enough time to explain. Someone else did explain the current status of Donald Trump's war yesterday when Donald Trump didn't have the time to explain it. And it took exactly 5 minutes to fully assess the current status of Donald Trump's war. It happened at a congressional hearing. In the hearing, Congressman Seth Moulton of Massachusetts echoed a line that was by far the most important line and most memorable line delivered in a Senate hearing about war in our lifetimes. In 1971, long before he ever became a political candidate, John Kerry was an eloquent leader of the Vietnam veterans against the war, and he delivered the most riveting Senate testimony of that war to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Each day, to facilitate the process by which the United States washes her hands of Vietnam, someone has to give up his life, so that the United States doesn't have to admit something that the entire world already knows, so that we can't say that we've made a mistake. Someone has to die so that President Nixon won't be, and these are his words, the first president to lose a war. And we are asking Americans to think about that. Because how do you ask a man to be the last man to die in Vietnam? How do you ask a man to be the last man to die for a mistake?
Congressman Seth Moulton echoed that line yesterday. Congressman Seth Moulton was born 7 years after John Kerry's testimony about the Vietnam War, testimony that helped end the Vietnam War and saved American lives and Vietnamese lives. Like John Kerry, Seth Moulton is a combat veteran, a former United States Marine in Seth Moulton's case. Congressman Moulton used every second of his 5 minutes yesterday questioning Admiral Brad Cooper in a way that left the Admiral repeatedly close to speechless. And in the middle of Seth Moulton's questioning, he asked the Admiral if he remembers General William Westmoreland. It is an unexplained reference in the middle of the questioning, but the Admiral knew that Seth Moulton was referring to the American military commander in Vietnam who told a long string of lies about the Vietnam War and how well it was going when the United States of America was, in fact, losing that war every single day of that war. It was Seth Moulton's way of saying, be careful, do not step into the model of lying that the American military commanders fell into during a war in Vietnam that they could not defend or explain and could never win. Watching congressional hearings can be frustrating these days, with Trump cabinet members thinking that they can just lie their way through those hearings and accuse senators and members of the House of lying when they are sitting there doing the lying for Donald Trump themselves. They can be maddening affairs to watch, but in his 5 minutes yesterday, Congressman Moulton delivered exactly what a congressional hearing at its best is designed to deliver to the American people: clarity. In this case, it was an honest and clear assessment of the war that Donald Trump just does not have time to explain.
Admiral Cooper, you keep using the term significantly degraded. Last summer, we were told that Iran's nuclear weapons program was obliterated. Can you clarify the distinction between obliterated and significantly degraded?
Congressman, again, I think appropriate to talk about anything regarding the Iranian nuclear program.
No, I'm not asking you to talk about the Iran nuclear program. I'm asking you to talk about English language. What's the difference between obliterated and significantly degraded? Are they the same?
Congressman, anything regarding the nuclear program.
I'm not asking you to talk about the nuclear program, Admiral. I'm asking you to answer a question that applies to a lot of things beyond the nuclear program. You've also said that their ballistic missile program was significantly degraded. What does that mean?
The specific numbers are best, as you know from your own.
Well, President Trump's own national security strategy, which he signed in December, 5 months ago, used the exact same phrase, significantly degraded. So if this was true back then, 5 months ago, then why did we start this war? Was he lying to us then?
Congressman, from a military perspective, anything regarding
Admiral, are you familiar with General Westmoreland?
I'm very familiar, Congressman.
He's well known for talking about body counts. Now, when I think about you in this war, I always think about how you always got up there and would say everything's going according to plan. So let me just ask, Admiral, where was closing the strait in the plan?
I'm happy to discuss the specific operational aspects.
But did you just not anticipate that? Did you not think that Iran could do that? Or was that part of the plan here?
Congressman,
for 250 years, the Navy has kept sea lanes open and free. Under every previous president, the Strait of Hormuz has been open. So why is it closed under your watch?
Congressman, I've traveled through the Strait of Hormuz probably 100 times. I'm intimately familiar with it as a combatant commander.
So why is it closed? If you're so familiar with it, did you not anticipate that Iran might
answer the question? If I may answer with respect, with all due respect. My responsibility as a combatant commander is to lay out all the options, present those to the Secretary and the President. They make policy-level decisions.
So you presented
the operational aspect.
So, Admiral, you presented the reality that Iran might close the strait to the President and the Secretary of Defense.
Anything that I discuss with respect to
okay, well, let's go back to the plan. Where was begging China for help opening the strait part of the plan?
So from a military perspective,
there are multiple reports now public that Iran has already reconstituted many of its bombed out missile sites. Was that part of the plan too?
Those reports are inaccurate.
Okay. I will actually give you credit for regime change. I know that was part of the plan. You've replaced an 86-year-old in failing health with a fatwa against producing nuclear weapons, with a more hardline guy in his 50s who, in case he wasn't hardline enough, you killed his immediate family. Was that part of the plan? Is that the regime change you wanted?
Congressman, we were given very specific military objectives to degrade Iran's power projection capability. That's exactly what we did.
Okay, so in the course of doing that, you also lifted the oil sanctions on Iran, giving them about $14 to $16 billion. They can buy a lot of ballistic missiles for that. Was that part of the plan? Lifting oil sanctions on them in the course of the conflict? They kill 14 Americans, we lift oil sanctions on them?
As you know, sir, the U.S. military does not lift sanctions. That's a policy decision.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out where it was part of the plan. On March 5th, you talked about how you built the most integrated air missile defense or air defense system in the Middle East, and yet well into the war you had to ask Ukraine for help with defenses against drones.
That's not accurate.
Okay. What about oil prices, gas prices? Was oil prices going up 56% part of the plan?
Congressman, as you know, from a military perspective, we don't deal in oil and gas prices. I defer to the appropriate authorities within the government.
Okay, so since none of this seems to be part of the plan, what's the plan now? What's the plan now to actually win this war? Because it feels like we're losing. We don't have a nuclear deal. We don't have the strait open. The president has called for unconditional surrender. Is that part of the plan?
Congressman, we achieved all our military objectives. We're presently in a ceasefire. We're executing a blockade, and we're prepared for a broad range of contingencies.
Well, it doesn't seem to be going well, and I would like to know how many more Americans we have to ask to die for this mistake. Do you know?
I think it's an entirely inappropriate statement from you, sir. With
Jim
all due respect. With all due respect.
It's not a statement, it's a question.
And that is how you do it. Senator Cory Booker will join us after this break. Senate Republicans are having a tough time trying to pass their Republican reconciliation bill in the Senate.
Democrats are going to force Senate Republicans to vote on amendment after amendment about Trump's ballroom, Trump's slush fund, and the rising costs of Trump's war. They're not going to be able to hide.
Joining us now is New Jersey's Democratic Senator Cory Booker. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, Donald Trump believes that he's got the parliamentarian to blame for losing his ballroom in the Senate reconciliation bill. But John Thune told reporters today, in effect, he didn't have the votes. He didn't have Republican votes, enough Republican votes in the Senate to hold on to it in that bill, even if the parliamentarian let it go.
Yeah, Donald Trump is just ignorant of governing and government. The only thing he seems like he knows how to do is to steal money from the American people while they're paying higher prices. And so we're jamming Republicans in every way possible. We're going to continue to jam and jab at them until they start to open their eyes, not only to see what their dictator-in-chief is doing, this kleptocrat, but also see what the people in their states really want, which is a government that works for the people, not for the enrichment of the president.
It seems with Senator Lisa Murkowski, now Senator Bill Cassidy, that the Democrats have more possible Republican allies in the Senate now on some of these issues.
Well, I like to think it's the Constitution that has the allies. Look what we've been doing on the war powers. The Constitution clearly says war powers lie with the Article 1 branch, with the Senate. But we have been forcing them to look at the fact that they weren't doing their duty. I'm glad to have led with about 5 or 6 other senators to force vote after vote. 8 times Republicans have looked away from the Constitution and their duty. But on the 8th time we've done it, we got 4 of them, including Cassidy, to look back. And that's going to be the strategy here, is we're going to continue to jam and jab at them until they start to realize that their fealty must be to the Constitution, not to the would-be king, and understand that guy is stealing from the American people for his slush funds, for his ballroom. He is actually conducting foreign policy to enrich himself and make all of us poor. Remember that his Middle East policy right now is grifting. It is the jet from Qatar. It's World Liberty Financial getting hundreds of millions of dollars from the UAE. It is selling chips that to these allies of ours while he's investing in NVIDIA stock himself before the public announcement. This isn't governing. This is grifting. And we're going to hold the Republicans that have been looking the other way accountable and squeeze them until they start doing their jobs and being loyal to the Constitution and not to the grifter kleptocrat in chief.
Senator, on the slush fund that is just the most indescribably corrupt thing you could imagine a president publicly engaging in, do you believe that there would be enough Republican support in the Senate to actually kill it?
I mean, dear God, I hope so. We're starting to see that. We're going to push it again tomorrow during this vote-a-rama. And people across this country are beginning to demand change. Remember what Frederick Douglass says, power concedes nothing without a demand. And Americans are wising up to this president who's made more money in office than all the other presidents before him combined, and who is making foreign policy disasters, but he's getting rich off of it. Remember, before he went to China, again, he's investing in NVIDIA stock as he's turning over Chinese chips. China, while they're playing nice with the president, are putting billions of dollars into the pockets of the Iranians who we're at war with. This president is a disaster for everybody except for his own bank account. And we're going to force Republicans to confront that and own it. And if they don't start joining us in stopping him and providing checks and balances, accountability and oversight, as the Constitution says is our sworn duty, then we are going to make sure they suffer for it in the midterms.
So you've got a system here on the slush fund. It's the Treasury Secretary, Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary, has to send the almost $1.8 billion to the Justice Department. There seem to be more than one area of penetration here in terms of what Senate investigation of this matter should include.
Yeah, there's lots of points with which we could stop this. From the public exposure alone that should try to shame them from doing that. We have legal measures. Even the House of Representatives now is looking to file legal challenges against them. And then there's that oversight that you're alluding to. All of this should be able to stop the most egregious forms of injustice we have ever seen in our country. But nothing works unless you work it. And to have a Republican-controlled Congress who are congressional enablers to someone who is destroying our economy, destroying our health care, destroying the bank accounts of many families who are barely staying above water as he enriches himself. This is going to continue until Republicans hold him to account. And that's what our fights are about. And that's why we've been trying to jam them and force them vote after vote, whether it's the Iran war or, as you heard from Schumer, it's going to be about the ballroom and these other kind of really grifting things that he's doing to enrich himself, expose the things that he's trying to get money for. And remember, I mean, this is a guy that's used the Justice Department to investigate the head of the Fed for some minor cost overruns. Mm-hmm. And now he, who said that he was going to pay for this with private dollars, is coming to us with hundreds of millions of dollars. And so we see what this system is rigged. It's to support him, his vanity projects, his golden calf, as Americans every day are paying millions and millions of more dollars at the pump collectively because of his failed foreign policy that has accomplished nothing in terms of holding the regime accountable, nothing in getting the fissile material out there, nothing in terms of making Americans safer. But his foreign policy clearly has made him hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. This is a corrupt president, and we're going to hold accountable not just the corrupt president in our fight, but we are going to more and more show that the people who are enabling him and that are complicit in his corruption, that we, the people, must hold them, those Republicans in Congress, accountable too.
And one of the other important agenda items for Donald Trump in the Senate is to get rid of the so-called filibuster rule, the 60-vote threshold rule, which John Thune, Republican leader, seems to not be inclined to do. But Donald Trump wants them to do that so that they can pass a voter restriction bill. That seems to be Donald Trump's only strategy for the next election, is to restrict the right to vote as much as possible.
Well, let me just tell you this. What's going on with restricting the right of vote is being enabled by a corrupt court. Remember, the corruption is not only in the executive branch. We have a Supreme Court that takes millions and millions of dollars of gifts, cash, RVs, you name it, on them as well, by people who have matters before that body. So I want to say clearly, and this may not be something you agree with, I think the filibuster, which in American history has been used in the civil rights movement to stop civil rights legislation, it was then suddenly brought back by Mitch McConnell to stop Barack Obama from putting people on the bench. The filibuster is an awful tool that's been corrupted. We need to go back to a real filibuster, which if you want to stop something, stand on the Senate floor, because we are going to get the House and the Senate back and the White House. And then those guys are going to use the filibuster to stop us from making gains on health care that the American people want. Stop them from changing the rigged tax code that's allowing 88 of our biggest companies to pay nothing in taxes while Americans pay too much. So it is time that we reform the filibuster so we can do big things again, like put on the Supreme Court real ethics laws and term limits. But right now, we are fighting a war against a kleptocrat who's trying to undermine our democracy for his own enrichment. And Republicans in Congress, dear God, they are enablers, and we're coming after them. We're going to do everything we can on the floor tomorrow and every other day to stop them.
We will be watching. Senator Cory Booker, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, a House Republican congressman said, we're going to try to kill it, about Donald Trump's slush fund for paying criminals. Congressman Jamie Raskin now wants to subpoena the creators of the Trump slush fund. Congressman Raskin joins us next. Today, at a House Judiciary Committee hearing, our next guest, Congressman Jamie Raskin, asked the committee to subpoena Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary, an acting Attorney General, and others involved in the creation of Donald Trump's slush fund to pay convicted criminals who attacked the Capitol. That motion was blocked by Republicans on the committee in a close vote, 18-17. Today, Republican Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania said he's going to try to kill the Trump slush fund.
What do you make of this $1.7 billion fund for
bad news? We're going to try to kill it.
You're going to try to kill it?
Yep.
Wow. Okay. And how?
Well, we're considering legislative options. We're going to write a letter to the AG to start, but we're considering a legislative option.
Okay.
We're trying to unpack exactly, what the legal machinations are, but can't do that.
Joining us now is Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He's the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Who do you want to subpoena in this matter?
Well, starting with Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, the so-called CEO of the IRS, the general counsel over there, and of course, the acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche. So we sought to subpoena 5 of them, the people who were involved in this very dirty deal. Because this thing is just contaminated from top to bottom, Lawrence. It started off with Donald Trump bringing a completely bogus lawsuit for $10 billion against the IRS, which is like 90% of their federal budget. And the substance of it was just pathetic and a complete loser case. But even beyond the substance of it, it was beyond the statute of limitations. And so there was a 25-page memo written at the IRS explaining that the IRS and the Department of Justice didn't need to settle the suit because there was nothing to it. And meantime, the judge in the case, Kathleen Williams, had set an oral argument for May 20th on her question, which was, were the two parties even adverse to each other? Were they opposed? Or was this, in fact, a so-called collusive settlement, meaning they were working together basically to kind of perpetrate a fraud on the public in the court? And 2 days before that was supposed to be heard, and after this IRS memo saying there was nothing there and this could be blown out of the water just on the statute of limitations alone, Donald Trump withdrew the suit and just terminated it because he knew that that would have been the end of his dreams. But then he terminated it by virtue of creating or ordering a settlement with the Department of Justice and setting it up with his people. Why would the Department of Justice and the IRS, if they really were adverse to Trump and if they were really upholding the public interest, why would they have settled at that point when it was clear there was nothing to his case? And their settlement was to create this nearly $1.8 billion political slush fund, which is an absolute violation and usurpation of congressional spending powers and legislating powers, because we're the ones who have the power to set up a program and to fund it, not the president, and also a complete usurpation and violation of judicial powers, because they're the ones who hear actual cases and controversies. And so there's not a law against weaponization. You would have to find that there was violation of some actual criminal or civil law. But they're basically saying they're going to just invent a new fantasy court, a royal court for Donald Trump to bestow $1 million gifts on Proud Boys and Oath Keepers and rioters and insurrectionists. And in addition to everything else, it violates the 14th Amendment in Section 4, which says neither the United States nor any state shall pay the debt, shall assume the debt of insurrection or rebellion against the United States. And what is this other than a plan walking right into that quicksand? So there are about a dozen reasons to reject this, and we're hearing about more and more Republicans saying this is a bridge way too far. And for some reason, Lawrence, this might be the issue that really gathers the Congress together to shut down this reign of lawlessness.
So the commission, so described in these ridiculous settlement documents, is a completely secret operation. There's no way, in the way I read the settlement document, to even know when the Treasury Secretary is going to or has sent the $1.776 billion to the Justice Department. How will we even know the day that happens?
We won't know. The whole thing is cloaked in secrecy and deception. We won't know when the money goes there. For all we know, it's already gone there. And we don't know when the money gets dispensed to the political patrons and foot soldiers in the MAGA movement. There will be a quarterly report given to the Attorney General, but that's private. And the Attorney General either can decide to pocket veto it, or he could show a couple things and not others, but likely we'll never see the end of it. Why would we even contemplate going completely outside of our constitutional and legal order? We've spent more than 2 centuries evolving the institutions we've got to hear actual cases or controversies. And if it's a court, it's in Article 3, and it's not in the executive branch. And if it's not a court, what is it? I mean, we may as well just set up a game show called Who Wants to Be a Mega Millionaire, and let's let the whole public vote on it. Who are these 5 people or 4 people and 1 recommended by Congress, right? I mean, let's let the whole public in. Let's vote. In fact, why don't we give the Capitol Police officers and the Metropolitan Police Department officers, more than 150 of whom were injured, wounded, disfigured, a lot of them forced out of police work, give them a chance, and they can go up head to head against individual insurrectionists, rioters, and white nationalists. And then the public can vote who they think should be compensated. Because I'll tell you this, the police officers have gotten zilch Zero from the Trump administration, which gave a $5 million settlement to Ashley Babbitt's family, despite the fact that there were two different federal investigations, one by DOJ and one by the Capitol Police, finding that the police had behaved completely reasonably in that case. So you've got a bunch of people who have not been able to win anything in court. And how could they? They've not had their convictions reversed or their indictments quashed in any way, and they've had every conceivable right and benefit afforded to them. And now they want to develop a completely new system within the Department of Justice under Donald Trump's thumb.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
You bet.
And coming up, Senator Jon Ossoff knows who he is campaigning against in Georgia: Donald Trump and Donald Trump's corruption. Senator Jon Ossoff joins us next. Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff is the only Democratic senator up for re-election in a state that Donald Trump won in 2024, and he is campaigning against Donald Trump's corruption.
You aren't the problem. Neither are your fellow Americans. The problem is a corrupt and failing political system. The problem is that the people's elected representatives don't represent the people. They represent the donors and special interests. Corruption is why things don't work for ordinary people. This fight isn't just about politics. It isn't just about one man or one party. It's about power. Who has it and who our system serves. If we can break the grip of corruption, our politics can meet the people's needs instead of serving the wealthy and powerful. That's a fight we have to win.
Joining us now is Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff of Georgia. He's a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Senator, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It seems that the votes that Senator Schumer is going to force coming up in the Senate, even this week, go to some of these issues that you're talking about in terms of the Trump team corruption that the Senate Democrats now are trying to block.
Lawrence, thank you so much for having me. And yes, and look, I am running in Georgia against two Trump lackeys who you can rest assured as they race for the president's approval would be voting for this crooked ballroom and this insurrectionist slush fund. And in fact, every national political reporter in the country should be putting that question to these two candidates tonight. They want to be candidates for the U.S. Senate. Let's see them prove to the people of Georgia once again, because they're pro-war, they're pro-tariff, they're pro-cutting health care. Let's find out where they stand on the crooked ballroom and the insurrectionist slush fund. And I want folks to understand the stakes of this race here in Georgia. As you said, I am the only Democratic senator running for re-election in a state that Donald Trump won, and I'm facing down two Trump loyalists. The GOP will spend hundreds of millions of dollars to try to defeat me in the toughest battleground state in the country. And there is no path back to the majority. There is no path back to stopping Donald Trump in the Senate without winning in Georgia. So this is something people can do right now to make a difference. I'm asking them to go to electjon.com and help me win this razor close and essential Senate race in the state of Georgia.
What are Georgia voters telling you about what they think the top issues are now?
Lawrence, I am hearing from Republicans who come up to me on the street, or they approach me at the airport, or maybe they have my number and they give me a call, and they're telling me that they are voting for a Democrat for the first time this year because they've just had enough. The abuses of power, the blatant self-enrichment and corruption. While the American people face all-time high prices for rent and groceries and a meal out at a restaurant and the power bill, The people have had enough. And I believe that a mighty wave is building to rebuke these abuses of power and to restore checks and balances. But it's all, once again, as it has, election after election, going to come down to this race in Georgia, which is why, again, I'm asking people to go to electjohn.com and help out our campaign.
As you split your time now in this year, as you have to, between your duties in the Senate and the need to campaign in your home state of Georgia, how do those two things interact? How does the work how do you bring that work in the Senate back to voters in Georgia to explain to them what that work is really about?
Look, just this morning, I was on the phone with leaders in the Valdosta community talking about our work to help strengthen Moody Air Force Base, to sustain it into the future. I am laser focused on delivering for the state of Georgia and doing my constitutional duty to hold an out of control executive accountable. And these two things go hand in hand, as does our obligation as citizens at this pivotal moment in our history to stand up and be counted. We have an opportunity this fall to send a message that will echo down for generations that these kinds of abuses of power will not be tolerated from a president of either party. It is an obligation that we have to meet this moment. We're ready to do that in Georgia, but it's going to be tough, and we need the country behind us.
Senator Jon Ossoff, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
We'll be right back.